Welcome to this very special edition of the Author's Voice with KAJ, a show where we explore the stories behind the stories. Here we dive into the worlds created by authors, discover their inspirations, and ensure that you walk away enriched and inspired. And today we have with us Danielle Orsino, celebrated fantasy novelist, and she dreams of crafting immersive realms for our audience. And her compelling word weaving pays homage to a multitude of personal muses, from comic book writers Stephanie Williams and George Perez to artists like Steranko and Mike Diodato Jr. So many achievements she has got. We'll talk all about that. But today we'll be talking about mainly about Birth of the Five, Locked Out of Heaven. This book one we'll talk about. Welcome to the show, Jenya.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
You're welcome. Welcome to the show once again. This time on the Author's Voice of with KJ. And so coming to the book itself, we've got the book here with us. We'll be talking about that with you. Is First, before we come to it, just let us know a bit about your author's journey. How did you begin writing into, about this sort of fantasy novel, so that audience gets an idea about who they are listening to?
I have a very unorthodox journey into becoming an author. I was a nurse. I had a patient who no longer wanted to go through IV treatment. He mentioned a little fact about himself, and from there, I wove a story. I began to tell it to him every day that he sat down for treatment. And he's the one who said, go home and write this story. I was not a big fantasy reader, to be very honest with you. I liked Kim Harrison, Laurel K. Hamilton. Much more paranormal urban fantasy was my thing. I liked Mist of Avalon. That was probably the closest I got to epic fantasy. And I wasn't really in the genre per se. I wasn't a lover of fantasy. I'm a comic book geek. And I began just kind of crafting this world for him and telling the story orally. I would just sit down and be a storyteller. And he kind of kept pushing me to go write it. And so I went home and started writing this story. But the original story I wrote is actually volume 2, which will be out next year. Which was an urban fantasy. And then as I would find myself writing it, I would say, oh, they're going to want to know why this happened. And then I'd go back and write. And I kind of wrote the prequel, which is Birth of the Fae, Locked Out of Heaven, and that series, volume 1. And that's kind of how it started. I always make the joke, if you want to know what not to do as a writer, come talk to me, because I've made all those mistakes. And like I said, I was unorthodox. I didn't sit and get books on how to be a writer. So I just flew by the seat of my pants, and that's how I came to this.
Absolutely. But I'm still thinking about that, Danielle. A patient tells a nurse to write something, and she writes, and it all it changes everything for her. Means it itself is a big story. Means, how do you see that? Was it God sent sort of a moment? How do you see that when you look back?
So I look at it now, and yes, it was definitely one of those. If someone was to make like a Lifetime movie, it is that. It is that Hallmark Lifetime movie kind of thing. I did fight it. I wouldn't say that I listened right away. I kind of just shoved him off and was like, yeah, 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 okay, sure, one day, because I was going to go to physician assistant school. So I was right in the middle of the CASPA program and applying and taking prereqs, and I just kept pushing it off. And even my husband was like, you need to go write this down. He's like, this is really good. And I'm like, yeah, 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 yeah. Just kind of, and just kept doing it. And then the universe started working and doing little things. And I like to say it threw some pebbles at me. Then it threw a rock, then a brick, and then it dropped a boulder on my head and was like, are you going to listen? So it kind of just started to evolve, and roadblocks kept coming in my way to get to school, but I still thought I knew my plan, and the universe was like, "Oh, you think that's your plan? That's so cute. No, that's not what's going to happen. You're going to go write this book." But I swam upstream, I kept fighting against it, and eventually, you know, the universe kind of turned me, and eventually I learned.
Right. Did the patient of yours read that book later on?
Oh yes, I still speak to him all the time. He's read the books. He can't wait for volume two because I put him in volume two. He's actually the inspiration for the hero in volume two, A Fool's Journey. He's Agent Graham. So he can't wait. He keeps joking when he's going to make his literary debut. So he's very excited, and he's been a big proponent of all of this, as has my husband. So it's kind of funny to watch the whole thing evolve, and he's been cheering from the sidelines. He has a special dedication in all the books. It says, to the Ravens fan in the IV chair, because I'm a Giants fan. He's a Ravens fan in football, so we kind of clash on that a little bit. But yeah, he's been reading the books. He's actually a beta reader for. He was a beta reader for The Fool's Journey, which is as I said, volume two, and it's been kind of fun to watch it evolve, and he's enjoyed seeing how his little nudge came to be.
Absolutely. Now let's talk about the book. As you can
Mhm.
see it on the screen, this is the book, volume one. So, what is this book all about? Tell us a bit about the story of this particular book, what this book entails, so that people come to know about it and are also inclined to get this book. I'm sure it's a wonderful book and it has a great story inside. A lot of people do not know about fantasy novels, and also if you can tell from that perspective too, Daniel.
Great, I'd love to. My book is Locked Out of Heaven, is the first book in the series, and this is volume one. Volume one is about six books plus two novellas, so there's eight, and volume one is Birth of the Fae. So this volume is the origin story of the Fae. In most worlds, Fae are little fairies. In my world, FAE is actually an acronym. It's the Fellowship Aegis of Earth, the Defenders of Earth. In this book, it is their actual origin. They don't just exist. This is how they came to be. They were angels who could not go home. They were sent here by the creator to get the earth ready for the creator's next experiment, which is humans. So these are virtue angels, and in the hierarchy of angels, they're nature angels. They're sent to, get deer, to procreate deer, to make rivers and make mountains and things like that. They're very high in the angel hierarchy, just under archangels. So they think they're very elite. They think they're like God gifts, so to speak. On the other side are the Power Brigade angels. They are the foot soldiers of the archangels. They do all the grunt work. So they're the exact opposite of the virtue angels. And during this time, the war with Lucifer is happening. So one set has a very privileged life, the other is fighting a war. During this series, or during this first book, the war ends, and both think they're going home. And then they can't. The gates lock. They receive no message, and their wings slowly and painfully decay, and they are left on Earth. They receive no message, nothing. And so, as humans populate, they have to find a new identity. And they become what we humans know as our polytheistic gods and goddesses throughout history: Egyptian, Roman, Greek, pagan. And they find out human worship equals power. And they take the acronym of Fae, and they become the court of light and the court of dark. But they've got some daddy issues. They've got a bit of a grudge over what has happened, and they begin to fight amongst themselves and decide only one can stand, only one court. So what we get to see is exactly what happens. It's a civil war between the two of them, but human history plays out in the backdrop. And how exactly that the humans interpret what's happening is a bit different. And so that's the first book, is the Fae finding themselves, being locked out, finding themselves, having to deal with that emotion, and then humanity populating and how they interpret these Fae events. And some of the humans, they may think these Fae battles, they interpret them as biblical events. And so we get to see the setup for what will continue on through the rest of the series, and how the Fae kind of play in the shadows of humanity, down to we go from Tudor England in book two to the plagues of London, all the way through book six, which is Forgive Us. So there's a lot of questions in there, political intrigue. I don't have any smut. There is a enemies to lovers trope in book three. It starts, but I don't have any smut. It's more about finding yourself. which I think we can all relate to. I joke that I am your entry drug into the Fae world and into the fantasy world. I am not heavy Lord of the Rings fantasy, but I am epic in the sense of there are dragons, but even my dragons are not tools of destruction. They have their own society. They're very smart, sentient beings. They are not pets, and you get to know the dragons themselves and why they choose the side they choose. So every creature there has a reason for being there. It's not just like, oh, they breathe fire. I wonder why. It's nothing like that. There's a reason for every creature. And I try to set that world up because that was one thing, even when I did read fantasy, I was always like, why does a dragon breathe fire? And it was like, they just do. I give you a reason why they do.
Absolutely. So, who is this book for? Such type of novels. Who reads these novels? How do you plan these things for your target audience?
Okay, I'm going to be honest with you on this one. I didn't know a darn thing about target audience. I'm going to be completely honest, okay? When I wrote the book, I wasn't like target audience 18 to 49. I had no idea about any of that stuff. Originally, I was told I could not be a young adult because there are religious overtones. This does not push one religion or another. It's just I used angels. So people were like, oh, religion, oh my gosh, can't do it. Um, so I was not in that category. It is for people who do like Game of Thrones. I have found that audience does enjoy it because there is so much political intrigue. And when you read the books, there's always a little bit of a thread you want to pull and be like, oh my God, she said this in book one. And then book three, you're like, this came back. So I like to say, if you're a fan of comic books and you love Easter eggs, you'll like me because I'm a comic book geek. I tend to follow that comic book writing I leave you an Easter egg in book one and it comes back around in book five. And I love when readers pick up on that. They're like, that feather in book one that fell on Jarbok's face, there's something about that. And I'm like, yes, but you're not going to find out about it till book five. So you got to hang in there with me. I'm one of those. You got to be in it for the long haul, but my books are not big. They're never more than 200, 250 pages because I don't want to give you a big fat like War and Peace book. It's very intimidating, especially if you're not into fantasy. You're looking at it like one, I'm not spending money on that, and I don't blame you. Two, I'm not going to spend my life reading. So I like to get you in and out, but give you something to think about. So if you're looking for an intelligent read that's going to stick with you, that's what I'm there for. If you're looking for smut, I'm not your girl in this book, in this series. Book one, there is no smut. I kind of make fun of smut a little bit. I do have a quote unquote sex talk, and I use nothing but battle terms. And one of my lieutenants is talking to the king about it. And it's the most awkward son giving the father a sex talk you can imagine. And I flipped it on its head. So I'm not a smut girl. I get smutty in volume two, but once again, not too much because I kept thinking, oh my gosh, what if my dad has to read this? And that embarrassed me so much that I couldn't do it. So my books are more for political intrigue people who want a new take on the Fae and are tired of the same thing of, okay, here's the Fae king that steals, a human and they're going to fall in love. And it's like the same formula. I am not formulaic at all. And if you like Easter eggs, and you want something that's going to continue and you have to kind of pay attention, that's it. My books come out pretty quick, so I don't George R. R. Martin you. I'm never going to make you wait 10 years. But you have to hang in there with me a little bit. It will tie up, and I love cliffhangers. So we'll leave you on a cliffhanger. I'm so sorry, but I will do that to you. I love ending where somebody closes the book and goes, what the heck just happened? But they know book three is right there, so they don't have to wait too long. So I'm kind of if you want an exciting read and want to get lost in a world, that's where I'm at.
Right. These books need a lot of research, intelligence, understanding, human history, backdrop, politics, everything, and the fantasy part also. How to do that? What is the most challenging part of writing such books? This book, Danielle.
This book, these books just in particular, the dragons probably took the longest. I can, it's easy to find religious context and religious, things. That's pretty easy to find. But when you want to make dragons and creatures real and be, like I say, plausible on Mythbusters, that takes an extensive amount. I can make a map and I can figure out a magical system, but to make a dragon breathe fire, ice, or acid, that took me months upon months of research because, like I said, I didn't want my dragons to just exist and breathe fire, ice, or acid just because. So I had to go back to my nursing background and I built them from their digestive systems out. So I went back to bacteria and then was like, okay, if I'm going to build them from the gut, this is it. Then went through physiology and anatomy. I brought in a mechanical engineer, a physicist, and a veterinarian. And we sat there going through it. So I started with my vet, Dr. Gil Stanzione at Dakota Vet in Westchester County. I sat with him. I went in with one of my pups and was like, I got an idea for a dragon. And he looked at me. I remember he took his glasses off. He went, what? And he was just like, what are you talking about? I explained what I wanted to do. And he stuck his head out and he went, I'm going to be a minute, and kind of closed the door. And I explained and he went, this is actually a good idea. And that took me forever, just figuring out the bacteria, how I was then going to build it out from the stomach, the delivery system, all of that. Then I went to flight because I didn't want my dragons to be 747s. They could not be. I didn't need Neil Tyson, coming after me from the astrophysics department and being like, that's not going to happen. So all of that took me about 9 months of just dragons. And they're in the book a lot, but not 9 months worth of research. I just needed to get it down. Then I had to find an illustrator. I found Pandy Van, who's been my illustrator since day one, to draw them out. And all of that had to be done before I even wrote some of the dragon chapters. So that probably took me the longest. And really, I had to have that because without the dragons, there was no fantasy world. They're fantasy vernacular. So that was probably my biggest hurdle to get over because up to this point, the only dragons I knew were like Falcor from the Neverending Story, Maleficent's dragon from Sleeping Beauty. I didn't know enough about them. So really getting in and figuring out how to make them real. I hadn't even seen Game of Thrones when I wrote this. I binged it after I wrote book 5. So that was by, I think, the 6th or 7th season. I had never even seen them. And because I didn't want to be influenced by anything. So the dragons took me a long time. The rest of it came somewhat easy because I could do the research. But really getting those dragons to be real, that made the world then feel lived in. That there could be a dragon walking around. And then from there, I did the cosplay and stuff like that.
Absolutely. And this is the third edition, if I understand. And you
Correct.
say that this is the first time you have published this book completely the way you wanted. What were the difficulties earlier on, and now you are all putting it the way you want?
The first book was not edited properly from the first publisher. It just pretty much didn't get edited. I turned it in and they said they edited it, but it wasn't until it was published. So I was like, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong. The second version, the second publisher, it took a lot of my words and took things out. In I think it's chapter 3, Jarvok wakes up on the beach and then something happens where there was a long walk and a lot of, introspection. And there were other things. I had also wanted to add a chapter in there about Los the chameleon dragon's upbringing, and that was thrown aside. There were other little things that were just left out. This version, I kind of call it the director's cut. Here's everything I wanted to put in but was left out, including an extensive with the prologue. That's a little bit different. And really the second chapter, I'm sorry, with Jarvok on the beach, he meets Los. That was always my vision, was that he would meet Los much more earlier on to explain how close they are. That was never approved by both publishers. They did not like it. They thought nobody's going to care that he meets the dragon pup. And I'm like, people are going to care. And nobody agreed with me. Now he finally gets to meet him much more early on. Los is kind of his Wilson in this whole thing. So when they meet later, you get why they're so close and why he kind of reveres this little pup as a son, and why Los can get away with doing what I mean, he literally goes up and like flicks his little Angelite scar, and he calls him a nickname, and he's a little sarcastic, he's kind of Louise Belcher from Bob's Burgers. He gets away with so much that now you're like, that's why he knows him. It made more sense. So to me, these books are now fully me. I didn't have anybody to say, no, from a marketing standpoint, I think there are times where publishers are correct, and then there are times where they're too much into statistics and figures and facts. Sometimes the author just knows their reader.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that is where I want to understand is that, in terms of, particular favorite scene, which is the most favorite scene in this that you think readers love from your book?
From what I've heard, just from what I'm hearing, a lot of people do love the new interaction between Los and Jarvok waking up on the beach and meeting Los and having somebody there. They really do love that. They love hearing about Los's background and why he's the way he is. Because throughout the series, Los is a troublemaker. He's based off my Yorkie, Carlos. And my little Yorkie is loyal like you wouldn't believe. He's the most adorable, sweetest little thing, but he can be a sarcastic little guy. And I always joke if he could talk, this is who he'd be, as this little dragon. And people have come back and said they just really love it because they see their own uh, dog kind of reflected in Los, and that's what I was looking to capture. But that's probably been my most favorite, is people getting to know the character of Los a little bit more and seeing the relationship between Jarvok and Los evolve. And so as you see them later on in the series, and there's a pivotal scene, I think it's in book 6, where Jarvok's really beside himself, and you're kind of waiting for him to break, and Los kind of walks up to him and flicks his disc scar again. And everybody's like, "Oh, Los, it was nice knowing you." Like he's gonna lose his mind. And Los kind of looks at him and he's like, "I told you not to flick my disc." And he goes, "Well, you don't have a disc anymore. Technically, it's a scar." And they're waiting for Jarvok to just behead him. And he just starts laughing and he goes, "You got me on a technicality." And people really love that because it was a callback to book 1, but it also showed the closeness that this dragon knows him better than anybody else. And it's a lot like myself and Carlos, where this dog somehow just knows when I need something. And so I've enjoyed writing those scenes because they're more me, and putting me in those positions with Carlos. I think that's probably been my favorite, and it's been the best received, the most well received by the audience, because I think they get the authenticity of that moment. And that's when you know as a writer you've hit it, when it's that authenticity.
Absolutely. So, what sort of reactions do you expect from audience? What do you want? You want them to be happy reading it, or you want to give them some message through this book? What is it that you try to do with your books, Jenny?
Um, it's not necessarily happiness sometimes, because sometimes my books are not happy, and that's a good thing too. I want people to just think when they're done, because I do write from an omniscient point of view, and I'm writing it that way to show people there's always a different side. So when people leave the veil, I want them to leave thinking. I want them to have gotten lost for a little while because there's so much going on in the world. It's nice to get lost and not think about the problems all going on out here, you know? So my biggest thing is I want somebody to walk out saying, I I know somebody like Zion. I know somebody like Asa, or I've never thought of it that way. And I got lost for a little while. That's it. As long as you're thinking and maybe feeling compassion towards somebody a little differently, or maybe you've learned boundaries and you realize found family. because that's a big theme in my book, is found family, is a real thing, that's amazing. That's all I want, is if you can walk out going, you know what? I get it. I get it a little differently now. Awesome. That's just great. If it just makes you think about things just a little differently, and it just makes you pivot, I've done my job. And at the end of the day, if you don't pivot, but you just go, you know what, it was a good release, then my job is done. I'm cool.
Absolutely. Anything more on the upcoming projects, Danielle?
Books 1 through 5 are coming out. 6 will be out by June. And then we have the 2 novellas, which were already out. And then volume 1 is done. I am done for the Veil for now. And then book 1 of volume 2 comes out November 2025, December 2025. It is finished. We're going through the final changes on everything, just the final edits. And we're done. So that will be A Fool's Journey. And that will be book 1 of volume 2. And that will take us into urban fantasy. But I'm so excited for that. But everything ties together. So characters from, the first volume will show up. But if you've never read the first volume, it's a standalone. You can jump right into volume 2. So I'm really super excited. We have tarot cards, oracle cards coming out soon. A subscription box for tarot cards where you can get a crystal bracelet with them, things like that. So there's always new projects. I'm never not doing something with the Fae. So we're really excited about that. But the best place would be to sign up for my newsletter through my Instagram at DM Orsino Author. Check that out. Always keep up with things. And I'm always updating stuff. So that's really the best way. And they can always get the books on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, things like that. There are audiobooks available as well.
Wonderful. With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the Author's Voice book with KAJ. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.